This is Tony Novak with a video walkthrough of the engagement agreement for 2024. It is modified every few months as changes in tax law and business law develop, and that's the case here. This is the latest incorporating changes in business practice as well as changes in the Corporate Transparency Act, which become effective this week. All right, so the document is long. It's 13 pages, and that's why I make this video that's made perhaps a little more digestible and tolerable for some people than reading 13 pages. This is a generic contract meant to be a best practices contract. It says in this first introductory paragraph that it's the first part of a two-part contract between us. This is the general contract, and then there's a second part called a work plan, which lists the who, when, what, where, and how much details of each step. In other words, this document controls everything, and then we'll agree to specific work steps and then modifications of work plans if necessary as we go forward. And it says that this agreement replaces all of our previous agreements, meaning that if you've worked with me in the past and we've signed one of these in the past, this new version replaces it. If you signed online, the agreement there is that the new document becomes effective in 30 days if you should not update and re-sign after a change in agreement. All right. The summary part, it's important to point out that most of this document we would probably agree is common sense if you think about it. This is a best efforts agreement. In other words, you're doing your best, I'm doing my best. We cannot guarantee results or outcomes in the financial world, whether tax or investment or business or anything else. Neither of us can guarantee future results. Okay, the extensive list of contacts, the table of contents, which lists each of the details. It's broken down into 5 sections. The work process, how we handle communications, fees and payment. After the end of the engagement, responsibilities, and then miscellaneous, basically legal provisions. So let's run through that. I use we and our in most cases when I'm dealing with a small individual or a small business client. It is actually me as a person. However, I do use subcontractors and service providers for just about every aspect of my business. In other words, you will be dealing with me, but there's actually a big army of people behind providing services nowadays. You refers to you and your spouse. In other words, generally, I'll get one signature for a business, a designated representative, or one of the spouses, and unless tax authority specifically requires 2 signatures, I can work with one. When we say in writing, nowadays, that includes text messages. So you sending me a text message, I agree, is just as good as you picking up a pen and signing a document. Same thing in reverse. If I say I'll do something in a text message, that's the same as offering it in a written contract. All right, types of services I'm offering. Bookkeeping and compliance. Compliance typically means tax compliance, but also other business filings. financial reporting. Representation is a big part of what I'm doing. Problem solving with the government, usually. Outsourced CFO is often a strategic thing, often includes bank loans, grants, strategizing, and those things. Strategic coaching. Coaching is slightly different than advising. I find that I don't need to really explain that unless you want to. In other words, most of my clients don't care whether we're in a coaching session or an advising session. They just want to get to the best answer as quickly and efficiently as possible. Attestation, that means saying, here's a letter by your CPA says, and there are different ways to do that. Significant to notice that many opinions, compilations, reviews, or audits are very, very expensive. I have to hire a peer reviewer. I have to have those insured. I have to follow a lengthy documentation process. However, a CPA can sometimes bypass an attestation with a cover letter just delivering other documents. So keep that in mind. The most common situation is when you're asked to provide a CPA letter in connection with a bank loan application or a mortgage application. So we can deal with that if it comes up. In other words, I can often get around the most difficult, expensive parts by working with the lender. All right, the work plan. We will agree that's almost always by email. And the email title line says work plan or status update once it's already in place. And the first one will say proposed work plan, and then the others will often say status update. So this section, in addition to what we agreed to, the who, what, when, where, how much, in addition, I'll do these things. Basically, read what you sent, communicate with you, keep the documents you provide secure and available. It says for at least the period required by law and industry standards. I've not seen any need to not keep documents permanently in secure electronic storage. Who knows what the future could bring, but that's been the environment for the past few decades. Right. All right, limitation. Probably the most important is to not assume that anything we don't agree to and is not listed in the work plan is going to get done. We specifically have a list of tasks for that reason. If you just assume that other things were going to get done because your old accountant did it, that would not be a good way to proceed. We specifically list what tasks we're doing, who we're going to deal with, what services are going to be provided. CPAs are always include the statement that our work is not designed to discover fraud, deficiencies, or irregularities. If we suspect that something's wrong, I'll tell you. But it's not. Our work is not designed to serve as detective or forensic accountant in our general day-to-day work. And frankly, that usually works to your advantage. When something smells fishy, we're certainly going to talk about it. Often, a CPA's work involves the use of judgment, gray areas, unclear areas. And in each case, this is important, in each case that will be resolved by taking the position that most appropriately meets our goals under the law. The last statement says, unless otherwise instructed by you, we will resolve such questions in your favor whenever possible. In other words, most of the time, I'm working as an advocate for you, not as an advocate or a tax collector for the government. Obviously, we use a lot of services, and every service has its own operational policies, privacy policies, anything from Google to Microsoft or anything else can have problems. And if we have to change those providers, we will, but be aware that obviously that you and I aren't in total, complete control of all of our work. We do have to work within that framework. One of your main responsibilities is providing documents. If you get something in the mail, send it. Snap a cell phone picture and send it on. You are required by law to review all documents that you sign. You don't get to pass off signature responsibility. Again, that's whether it's electronic signature or paper. If you're signing off on something, you're taking responsibility. That's the same under all law. Okay. It mentions that most transactions are done by transaction ACH now, basically just bank account and routing number. That is extremely safe. Fraud is well controlled. If you don't think so, we should have a talk about that. But basically, our risks are more limited with electronic transactions than any other way, certainly less than mailing a check or something like that, or some other payment method. All right. So like every business that uses online services, I have a privacy and security policy that's available online. Most of it is duplicated in this document, but obviously there are other provisions that pertain just to online services. You're entitled to a copy of that if you need it. One of the points down here is it says that I may assume the same level of privacy and security as you do. In other words, if I offer a secure electronic portal for secure text messaging and secure document transfer, and then you use regular Verizon text message service, which is pretty darn secure, and you reply, you send a text message, and you send a picture of a document that way, well, then I can respond the same method. Notice you've set the standard for the level of security at less than maximum level of security, and I will maintain that. I won't take it down a notch. If you're using secure document portal, I'm not going to send you private personal information in a regular text message or a regular email. All right. Use of names. I'll mention this. So I do commonly every single day tell stories of clients without the names. I've been doing that for decades, and that's how I market, how I share stories, how I do continuing professional education, by simply that's storytelling in what we do. That does not involve that. I make sure that that's not done in a way that reveals any personal information, and I wouldn't say my immediate next door neighbor, for example, because that would be an identifiable comment. So we don't do that, of course. Use of individual client names only for, again, this is a common sense thing. If I have to verify employment or verify that you have an account with a certain, or you say you own something, and we have to work with that, so I have to verify ownership of that. So again, fairly common sense. That's the only time we would use your individual name. Would not describe private information without specific written authorization. That includes a mortgage lender, a banker, a prospective employer, any of that, you would need to give that authorization in writing. Use of business names, unless otherwise agreed. I presume that most businesses want to publicize the name of their accountant, and it gives a couple of examples. Pleased to be selected as the controller or the accountant for a certain company, but would not give information that might have a negative implication or connotation, like I'm the bankruptcy advisor for a certain company. Obviously, that's not something that we would release in public in that context. All right, online document handler. I already mentioned the secure online portal. And you're certainly welcome to use any method you want, just that I offer that highest level of security. I've already mentioned document retention. I'll always keep them for as long as to 7 years there. That comes from tax law. But so far, I've not had any reason not to keep documents permanently. Paper document handling is significant. I don't want to handle paper documents. I'm not prepared for it. I don't have the security facilities. I don't have the organizational storage. I don't have the fireproofs. I don't have the safe. None of that. So if we get them, we're going to modify the work plan and we'll say, hey, I took documents from you. I'm going to scan them and give them right back to you. I have a couple clients that drop documents off in my mailbox. You know, that the point is that liability is on them. That's not, I can't assume responsibility for documents that are left in my mailbox. And that's, it's a way of saying I'd really rather not deal with paper documents, but this, and the same thing with storage. Sometimes I get them and I don't get them back to a client for, or no, they're there for pickup, or we've not made arrangements for delivery. I had one that moved to South America, and they annoyed my wife because they sat by the front door for pickup for like 6 months, and finally she texted that a relative was going to pick them up. So, had they disappeared from the front door during that 6-month period, I can't be responsible for that. That's not reasonable. All right. In addition to our records, you have a legal obligation to keep certain original documents. This hardly ever comes up now, but yeah, you still, the fact that you gave them to us doesn't relieve you of your legal obligation to keep certain documents. All right, timing of work is critical, and the blessing of a small practice like mine is that I can be pretty precise, and I usually can act more quickly. I could say, all right, this is urgent. We need to get this done. I'm jumping this in front of other work, and I'm going to have it done by tomorrow night. So that is a significant part of our work plan. If it changes, if it's delayed. What I hear a lot of times during tax season is people, they drop their stuff off and they don't hear for weeks at a time. That doesn't happen with me. I update at least weekly, and if there's a change in the schedule as planned, we're going to include that in the change of work plan. All right. I handle a significant amount of banking transactions, collecting money in, making bill payments out, handling payroll, handling benefits, and it's a key part of our role. These are all handled as electronic transactions, and significant to know that there must be online audit trail. I'm not going to handle something where there's a pile of cash in the corner and I'm responsible for it, and we don't know who has access to that. That would not be something that an accountant could or would do. But when there's a secure system with an online audit trail, it is perfectly safe, and I am willing to handle those types of transactions and have access to making those kind of transactions on your behalf. All right. Primary system for me and something like 8 out of 10 small business is QuickBooks Online. You know, I'm not. I love some things and I hate some things, but the fact is that they are the dominant force, and so we're forced to deal with that. I do also deal with other online banking and payment systems, Relay, Melio lately, Gusto Payroll, and it mentions about the QuickBooks Green Dot checking account have been extremely profitable for small business clients. They really like that. Saves a lot of time and fees. There's no fees in it. So, all right, communications. All right, the whole reason you're dealing with me probably is for good communication, and so this falls mostly on me. I do provide progress updates just about weekly, and in the way of a written update. And nowadays, I do that by email, but supplemented by text message as a reminder is often the case. I have not used broadcast communications. That is where, you know, one email goes to 50 clients. However, we'll be doing that more in 2024. I have to. It makes sense to do that. I just haven't done it much yet. But I do have a MailChimp, which is owned by Intuit, QuickBooks parent, and do have that integrated with our accounting system. All right, non-secure communications. Just let you know you're welcome to reach me anyway at all, and people do. In the course of the day, I do get text messages from WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger and Verizon Messenger and the secure Orline portal text message. Basically, whatever works for you, I will do my best to go with the flow. The point is, though, that if I don't respond to, at least confirm receipt of your message, whether it's a voice message, or it's fax, email, text message, if I don't say got it and respond, then you need to assume that I didn't see it. So that's your responsibility to make sure that the communication was received, acknowledged, received. All right. Again, the secure communication is available. Rather than get into the two-step verification, let me just talk about fraud. Is just unbelievable. Every week or two, there's some new scam. It almost doesn't make sense to put in writing what the policy is because it needs to be changed so often. And I expect that will continue through 2024. I have to maintain the highest level of security that I can imagine. So what that means sometimes is if you call, this has happened, and really client called and said, "Hey, I'm at a bank. I can't remember my account number. Can you give it to me?" No, I can't. I'm going to have to call you back and hang up the call and call you back just for verification purposes. So you know, that's the way it is, and it's only going to get more complicated as artificial intelligence takes over a big part of this fraud attempt against small businesses and small business accountants. Right, again, it's saying that any communication that's not confirmed as received, we have to assume that it's not received. Fees and payment. It's real simple. So I can simplify this. We're going to agree in advance what they are. In very rare circumstances, do I say, okay, I'll take care of this today. Maybe it's a text message, and maybe we haven't had a chance to even talk. In that case, the word right there. The risk is on us. The risk is if I don't get an agreement on fee, I'm going to assume that we can come up with a agreement later. But in the meanwhile, that risk is on me. If the timing changes and there's a rush, that can and does change the fee. I mentioned earlier the ability to adapt and put emergency work in front, but that often means incurring additional expenses to put somebody else's work in a different order, or hiring another third party, perhaps a more expensive third party. So change of timing does change the fee. Advanced retainer just mentions 2,500 has become my, I guess that's my minimum single engagement fee. As a small practitioner, I guess, and none of us in our businesses try to have hard, drop dead rules. I try to work with each individual, but that's the minimum target individual engagement. And for 2024, the new client ongoing, that is a business arrangement, usually is looking for $1,000 revenue from one source or another. But 2,500 is the minimum that needs to be in this agreement as a commitment to take on a new client. And then it says, it can be a single or it can be ongoing, recurring ACH pre-authorized. I prefer that just because once it's set up, it doesn't have to be looked at again, and unless one of the payments bounces, in which case it's annoying. We have to go back and redo it. Right. Additional fees. Other accountants convinced me to eliminate almost all of that. I've kept a few just for convenience. I hardly ever use these, but I have them in the agreement that I can use them if I'm doing a lot of FedEx or special delivery, paper delivery, and it requires me to get in the car and drive out to the post office or delivery service. Then I can charge. If I have to rebuild something, it remains a charge that's in there. Again, I haven't really used that, but I could if it became a problem or an issue. Finance charge is built in, is specifically intended to help the collection agent in the event. And thank knock on wood, I haven't had a collection account in several years. Hope to keep it that way forever. But if I do use a receivables contractor, they have their own schedule. They get paid 50% plus of what they can collect. And that is, like I said, hopefully never have to deal with that again. Fees after the engagement. This comes up actually fairly often, where a client from 5 years ago wants copies of records that have to be searched for and compiled and reviewed before they're sent off. And so the fees after the end of the engagement, when we say the engagement is, our work is done, we've confirmed in a work plan that the engagement is finished, and then we come back and find out that there's something else. So basically we have to start from scratch and renegotiate that. Not that it needs to be a big deal, but the point is that it is separate and distinct. It's not reasonable to presume that services continue forever, particularly when there's a designated end of engagement. All right, third-party services. I use a lot of third-party services nowadays. That is the basis of small business accounting. I don't actually do anything. Everything is done by some type of automation and other firm and other people. In some cases, we're going to use QuickBooks Online, for example. They give me a discount, and I can either pass that discount on, or I can charge you the regular price and keep the markup essentially as a sales incentive from them. So in other words, I would be getting compensation essentially from a third party. And so that is allowed. I just disclose that. if I'm getting any payment from any third party other than you, that is legally and professionally considered a conflict of interest, which is legal and allowed. However, I need to disclose it. All right. Payment, usually the proposal is that I'll start work as soon as I get the payment. That's usually what it says, and it's a click to pay agreement. Generally it's first come, first serve. In other words, if I send out 3 proposals today, the one that gets accepted and sent back and paid first is the one that gets worked on first. That's just a matter of practicality. So again, the work plan, we will confirm the end of the engagement. As I've done everything I've said I would do, you've done everything you said you would do, our work is completed. That's different than a ongoing engagement where it just says until one of us cancels, every month I will do this, file your sales tax return or whatever it is. Early cancellation is available. Either of us can terminate at any time. In that case, the rest of the work starts. The fees already paid stay paid. The fees that are unpaid stay unpaid. And I think there doesn't need to be any reason given for early termination. We can just change our mind. And the intention of this agreement is to minimize conflict, minimize the risk of someone being upset and wanting to sue the others. The idea is to walk away calmly and smoothly. All right, this was something new that was added this year. When we file things online, if I file with a third party, with the Department of State or IRS, they will confirm receipt, and I will confirm with you that I did what I was supposed to do. I filed it, I received the confirmation. Sometimes it turns out to be wrong. And if that's the case, not my problem. In other words, we have an additional issue to deal with to include in our work plan, and we have to modify our work plan for that. Unfortunately, that happens more than any of us would have guessed over the past year. All right. So, and this says after the engagement is ended, we can start a new one, but there's no obligation to do that. If we're done and one of us wants to stay done, we can stay done and not reopen an issue. A common example is if you filed a tax return and you forgot something, you say, "Oh, I forgot to add this document." Normally, I'd agree to amend it. We'd make a new agreement and we'd amend it. But if there's been some problem and for some reason I'm not comfortable, by that point, I could say, no, I'm not going to reopen it. You'll need to find somebody else to do that. This is a unique provision. Replacement of electronic. Almost everything we do is electronic signature, and including just an email that just says you type the word agreed. That's considered an electronic signature and authorization that allows me to rely on that. If, however, some third party says, "Where's the manual pen and paper signature?" IRS has been doing a lot of this lately. You know, they look at an electronic signature and they compare it to a manual. If they don't like it, they'll ask me to go back and do it again. So the point is that I will always accept an electronic signature. If somebody else wants a manual signature, you're agreeing in advance to replace that electronic signature with a manual signature if I request it. Post-engagement questions. Of course, I want to hear from clients if something comes up after we're done the work. Uh, on the other hand, I'm not under legal obligation to address a letter that IRS sends about work that we've already concluded. We may need to get a whole new engagement. In 2024 tax engagements, however, you will see that audit protection and address of and representation is included in basic tax service. But again, if it's stated, obviously it applies, but don't assume that it applies if it's not stated. All right, this is important for a CPA. You have pretty strong level of privacy. We can't give out information to anybody unless it's you agree to it. If I receive a subpoena from a court, we are obliged to address that, and my address will be to let you know that I've received this subpoena. My suggestion, most likely, is going to be that you retain an attorney and have me work for your attorney. And then if your attorney says, don't respond to the subpoena, I'm going to follow that. I'm going to follow the advice of the attorney. That's how it works in this state of New Jersey and some other states. In other states, like Texas, for example, there is a CPA client privilege where I don't need the attorney. I can just say, my client told me not to talk to you, and I Mr. Law Enforcement Officer, and therefore I'm not going to talk to you. So that's the distinction there. Right. Reopening, amending a tax return, that's becoming more and more common. There's always risks, there's always pros and cons to amending a tax return. If it comes up, we will discuss the pros and the cons. And like I said, it's never a clear cut answer. It's not always correct to amend. It's not always correct to ignore. We have to discuss each situation. All right, local taxes, particularly for Pennsylvania people. Our agreement, don't assume that I'm filing your local taxes. The Pennsylvania localities don't recognize a third-party tax professional as authorized to file this. Basically, what I do is print out, you get a PDF of the data, and generally most people just go online in a couple of minutes, just type that data into the local tax return and do it themselves. If you're not comfortable doing that, I can do it, but don't assume that that's an included service unless we agree to it. Again, I said in the event of audit, don't assume audit representations included. However, in most of our tax engagements, which I expect this coming year, audit representation would be included. Penalties, I'm not assuming the cost or risk of taxpayers, except in a few circumstances where I've made it part of the engagement agreement. In most cases, a significant part of my work in representation involves the reduction or elimination of penalties, but there can't be any guarantee, and there can't be any there's no legal transfer of risk of penalty from the taxpayer to the tax preparer. I think that that's a commonly misunderstood issue in tax law. You can't get out of the penalty by saying my accountant made the mistake, although it's a pretty darn good defense in many cases. All right. Use of tax information. This comes directly from IRS. The wording that we can't, I can't send it to a mortgage company that wants to send you information to sell mortgages. Any release of your information has to come directly from you. Uh, I mentioned earlier about coaching, coaching, consulting, advising, attestation. These are all different work processes that assume a different uh, role of authority and and approach towards our conversation. And it may be important here to notice that there is a distinction in practical conversation. I notice that my clients really don't care, but I do have to disclose that there is a difference between coaching and advising. If in the course of my work, I come across other issues that were not part of our engagement agreement, my obligation is to bring these to your attention. My obligation is not to tell you how you need to handle it, and certainly not to tell any other party of a problem that may exist. Legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. You're not dealing with a law firm. You should consult your own lawyer for legal advice. However, uh, small businesses tend to not do that as much as we should. And so under AICPA guidelines and other professional guidelines, there are a certain number of things that I can do that are not considered practice of law. Those are listed here. It's basically the things that you sort of expect and hope that your small business accountant can handle for you without having to hire a lawyer. This last part is added just this year, the Corporate Transparency Act. All partnerships, S corporations, LLCs are affected by this. A significant list of companies are not affected, and so it's important to first determine whether you are affected, what needs to be provided, and then how best to do that. I've put out a number of publications, and every other, I think, agency has separately. I mentioned about the blast email. I'm expecting to send a blast email about Corporate Transparency Act compliance. The end advice, though, is really simple. If you think you're affected, either talk to your lawyer or talk to us. You should do one of those two things. If you don't, and you have trouble, and these fines can be substantial, then we don't have a good course if we're not talking about it. All right. Here's something a little bit unusual. I do have a public acceptable public behavior policy. I don't know too many other firms that do that. This came about as part of my work in the nonprofit field. Basically, it's sort of a don't ask, don't tell version, because you can do whatever you want in your own time, in your own space. But if I become aware of a client that is acting in a way that discredits the firm, I will simply end the engagement. That's just basically, and it's the same thing whether it's a work situation or a personal situation or customer. I've then had to do that, unfortunately, at the marina, where people were insulting other marina members, and we just had to end their rental agreement. Exceptional circumstances. Wow, this whole COVID thing, so we can have the best made plans and things, but the fact is that life can come along and just throw it all out the window, and we just have to deal with it. This is a legal contract in the form of the state of New Jersey. We are agreeing to use a electronic signature in almost all of our work. And then this final last provision I've added this past year, for some reason, my best clients, and they tend to be older, they tend to be affluent, they tend to travel, have a habit of disappearing right before deadlines. So, we're working on something. I say, okay, I'm going to get this to you by by this evening for you to sign, and then they just disappear. Unfortunately, some of it is with COVID, but the point is that if it's all in our agreement all along, and I expected you to sign off on something, make a payment, conduct an action, complete a filing, um, and all of a sudden I can't reach you, and it's a choice between suffering the consequence of missing a deadline or just assuming that I have your signature. Sometimes it's as simple as, I missed the text message, or I missed the email, or whatever. I can elect that limited durable power of attorney, um, even when I don't have an official other additional power of attorney, which I often do for business clients as well. So I added that specifically just for, frankly, tax night deadline work. I've literally had people like fall asleep before they click the approved file button. So that was something added. All right, that's it for this review. It probably went longer than I wanted, but at least we have a video. I'm happy to go over this with you individually if we need to, but the point is, I think it's a good agreement and a good basis for a productive and successful work relationship.